Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Positive Leadership Podcast. Over the past 100+ episodes, we've explored how purpose-led leaders can generate positive energy, a lot of that. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back a guest who has reshaped the craft of coaching for leaders globally, starting with me as a guinea pig. The first time he joined the show, he turned the tables and coached me live. And that episode as well quickly became one of your favorites. His insight will still resonate in my own leadership journey. And judging by your messages, I think it's resonating with you too. From his Australian upbringing and Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford to founding the renowned Box of Crayons and hosting the Change Signal podcast, Michael Bungay Stanier has dedicated his life to championing curiosity, purpose, and meaningful change. Michael, I'm so delighted to have you back on the show here in Paris.
I know. How wonderful, JP. Thank you for having me back. It's been so great watching this whole journey, since starting the podcast. I remember giving you advice, which is like, podcasts are a terrible idea. Nobody will listen. And I'm like, never accept advice from me because I don't know what I'm talking about. But what a treat to be back, and what a treat to be back in Paris with you. So thank you.
Wonderful moment to spend together, Michael. So let's begin with your journey in Australia. I love always to ask my guests, their roots. And for you, you're born in Canberra, the little known capital of Australia.
That's it.
With a dad coming from England. Mm-hmm. That's all I know.
Yes.
But how did your upbringing and the values instilled by your family kind of shape your early sense of curiosity, maybe, and also leadership as a kid?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My parents had a very happy marriage, and I'm the eldest of two brothers who I really love and get on with. So we were a really good, tight family unit. I think a number of things influenced my upbringing. The first is both my parents were great servant leaders. They really believed in acts of service. They made the world better. They gave more to the world than they took from that.
Into their local community as well.
Into their local
family
community.
And communities.
So my dad helped build the local tennis court, served on boards of the local school. My mum would bring little cakes down to the primary school. My dad coached soccer. My mum helped out. They were just forever contributing to the world around them and making it better. And that's an influence on how I want to show up in the world as well.
Servant leadership.
Solid. And then the other thing was, I mean, to be honest, JP, they were very confused by me because
really?
they are
because
they are both they were both.
Were you the oldest? Actually,
I was the oldest.
Oh, okay, so
and they were both slightly modest, slightly self-effacing,
Yes.
and I just was born with a little more kind of like get out there and do it.
Okay.
And they told me they're like, we spent the first 15 years waiting for Michael to finally fail badly and wake up and give up. But even when I did fail badly, which was often, I would go, ta-da!
I'm still excited. I'm still alive.
And they, even as I was confusing them, they did a really beautiful job at just allowing me to be the best version of myself. So, when I was a teenager and I had a phase of sewing all of my own clothes. They're like, this is peculiar, but it's fine. We're gonna let them do that. When I was in my early 20s and I grew my hair really long and I had multiple piercings and earrings and stuff, they're like, we don't love that, but it's fine. So they only ever. I would say this in the language of today. I felt very seen and very heard by them, and encouraged to continue to turn up the volume on how I showed up in the world, even though that was not really their own style.
Yeah, so they embrace your uniqueness.
They saw my uniqueness, exactly, and just I felt very loved in that family, and I still do. Yeah,
which is wonderful because I think such roots are so important for anyone. So you earned a combined arts law degree at Australian National University. Yes. Thriving in literature. I know you still love it. You're a big book fan, actually, but struggling in law. Yeah. I understand you were eventually sued by a law professor, actually. It's another story itself. We may not go there completely, but do you recall those early days, this dilemma between literature and law? And what you took away from this legal personal challenge as well, maybe.
So in Australia, unlike in many countries, law is an undergraduate degree rather than a graduate degree. Like in the US, for instance, it's a graduate degree. And the other thing that's lovely about the Australian university system is it allows you to combine degrees. So you can do these 2 degrees at the same time. And people do interesting combinations like economics and science, or economics and Asian studies. So you're going to get this mixture of disciplines, which I think is interesting right away.
Yeah.
Honestly, JP, I did law because I was like, look, I'm really interested in literature. That's what I love.
Yes.
Can you make a living with a with a degree in literature? I'm not totally sure how to do that.
Okay.
So I took law out of kind of like backup safety plan.
Oh.
And it was seductive, of course, because when you start doing a law degree, you very quickly become swept into the I am going to become a lawyer.
Yes.
You work that as an outcome.
Yeah.
And there's all these steps that take you, and before you know it, you end up becoming a lawyer.
A lawyer.
I got pulled out of that stream. I won a scholarship that took me to Oxford, and
we'll come back to the scholarship. It's an important
saved me
piece.
from becoming a lawyer. So what was helpful about a law degree for me? One is met some lovely people there.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's something about the discipline of thought and argument that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thirdly, if I'm honest, every year we would do a show.
Yes.
It was called the Law Review, so it's like sketch comedy.
Yeah.
And that felt like a whole new blossoming for me. There was one skit that I did.
Yes.
Very influential on even who I show up now. It was called Synchronized Nude Male Modeling.
Wow. Wow.
So me and this other guy backed onto stage. We were naked. Ravel's Bolero was playing. And we went through these kind of synchronized movements, a bit like synchronized swimming.
Yes, yeah.
And then we backed off again.
Wow.
Everybody is grateful that YouTube hadn't been invented then, because the last thing anybody wants to see is video of that.
Yes.
But actually, when I think of my own personal values, one of the ways I frame one of my values is naked on stage, because I want to challenge myself. I want to push myself. I want to be a little bit provocative in terms of how I show up. And I just remember in the wings of the theater, taking off the bathrobe and going, what am I doing? This is a terrible, terrible decision. And then going for that. So that's my other legacy of law degree.
I didn't know that was part of the curriculum of becoming a lawyer,
Michael. You didn't have that in your research. Yeah.
So you then decided to apply to the Rhodes Scholarship.
Yes.
And the application process is among the most competitive in the world, I'm told, with extremely low acceptance rates and rigorous selection criteria.
Yes.
So the Rhodes Scholarship seeks individuals who are well-rounded with a bump, excelling across multiple dimensions while being exceptional in one or more areas. So then you move from Canberra to Oxford, which, by the way, was a city where your dad grew up, I think. Right. Yeah. And you pursued an MPhil in philosophy at Oxford, transformative chapter of your life. So can you share a pivotal moment at Oxford that led you to view leadership through the lens of active questioning rather than directive management?
Well,
and also need to understand what was your bump, by the way.
Yeah. So the Rhodes Scholarship was 2 things about that, JP. The first is, the first time I applied for it, I didn't get it.
Yep.
And that was a key moment for me, because I inquired about the process. They said, look, everybody applies, everybody gets a first interview, and then a shortlist happens and you get a second interview. Yes. So I applied, and I didn't even get a first interview. It was very demoralizing, because they told me everybody gets a first interview.
I can imagine,
and I was like, how bad am I?
Yeah.
And I then spent 2 years deciding to go back and give it another shot.
That's great.
And I do think part of the success I've had in my life, such as it is an unwillingness to take the first defeat as the defeat, but a willingness to kind of come back and give it another shot around doing that. The planting the seed around the questions.
Yes.
The real power for that was actually in my Australian university.
Okay.
And volunteering for the youth crisis counseling thing. And it come from me just sitting in my university classes going, you know what? I talk an awful lot in these classes. Yes. I seem to be taking up more than my share of airtime. Yes. Yeah. And that somehow took me to doing this training. And that was my first experience of understanding the power of a question. Yeah. Understanding the power of resisting, trying to solve the other person's question, whatever the problem was. Yes. Understanding that the person's first answer is probably not their only answer, and it's probably not their deepest answer.
The real problem as well. Yeah.
Stay curious, which is an ongoing theme for me in my life. Oh yeah. And actually, I think it was that work helped me win the Rhodes Scholarship, and then got me to Oxford.
To Oxford.
Yeah, and then I started seeing opportunities for leadership at Oxford, but actually it was almost, if you want to kind of fast forward a little bit, my first job out of Oxford. I'm now 25. Yep. I've now been in university for 6 years. Way too long. I'm like, I can't go. They had offered me a place to do a PhD at Oxford, and I'm like, I really don't want to do a PhD. I'm not smart enough, and I don't want to stay at university. And my first job was in an innovation company, launching products and services. Yes. And at the heart of that was running focus groups. So I would travel around England and the UK.
And question people.
And I would sit down with a group of people and I'd be going, so tell me about soup. Or tell me about credit cards. Yes. Or tell me about fish pies. Or tell me about frozen desserts. It wasn't very glamorous stuff that we were working on. But it was absolutely a process for me to learn how to refine
questions,
being present, asking questions, and allowing people to keep talking around that. And really, it was an accidental form of training around the power of curiosity.
No, wonderful. As you talk about creativity innovation, Michael, it reminds me actually of a great discussion I had on my podcast about a year ago with Luc de Brabander. Luc de Brabander is a Belgian mathematician, philosopher, and former BCG partner, recognized for his work on creativity, foresight, and critical thinking in business. In one of his best-selling books called Thinking in New Boxes, a new paradigm for business creativity, he introduced a framework for sparking innovation by challenging the assumptions that we make that he calls the boxes. Yeah. We think in and systematically creating new ideas or scenarios. And so to him, creativity is about changing the box. Yes. While innovation is about working with the existing box. The key is to realize what the box is in the first place, when it's getting old, and it no longer fits. So drawing on your time at What If Innovation, I think that was the name of the company, how did you guide leaders to recognize when their familiar box of assumption was outdated, and what did you find most effective in helping them adopt, or maybe even invent, a brand new box for fresh thinking?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, because often the briefs you would have would be tinkering with the current box. So, as a classic example, at one stage we were hired by Kellogg's to help them with cornflakes. Yes. And they're like, at the time, there was just like a box of cereal.
Oh, remember, I've been eating tons of cornflakes in my childhood.
and they said, we need to innovate around this. Yeah. But you can't change the packaging, and you can't change the product, and you can't change the process. And we were like, oh, this is it. This is the box. This is quite tricky. And what we did is we effectively broke that process down from a corn kernel planted in the ground all the way through. And each one of these moments, we went, is there anything we can do here to innovate around that? But that is absolutely kind of innovating within the current box. We're like, we've got to do that. Yes. Part of the shift, which we played a role in, a small role, I would say, is helping them go, look, at the moment, the bigger box that you're not seeing is we're trying to reinvent cornflakes in cereal in that as a breakfast.
As a breakfast, yeah.
So we try to expand the boxes around. It's a food. When can you eat food? Yes. It's a stationary eating act. How can we get beyond that?
Could be a social moment with others as well.
So there's a way of doing that. That's a much harder challenge for people because people don't love ambiguity.
For
and
sure.
They don't love uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you invite them out of the box,
yes,
you're inviting them into the unknown.
Yes.
And people create a lot of resistance around that.
I've seen that. I witnessed a lot of that in my life.
Well, tell me how you help people manage that. Because I do think one of the roles of senior leaders is navigating through ambiguity and uncertainty. You spend more time in that space. That's kind of at that senior level. You're like, all the hard decisions are here, all the unknowns are here.
Yes.
I'm just curious to know how you navigated yourself and how you navigated others through that hard time.
That's a big question. You're already starting to turn the table, Mike, aren't you? I'm in deep trouble now.
Yeah, you are. Yes.
No, something I've been certainly excited about, through my leadership journey and experiencing a lot, is this notion of bringing clarity to people.
Right.
And as the world became, for me, and I think for everyone on the planet, more complex, more ambiguous, a lot more volatile, even these days. We were talking before that podcast over lunch about geopolitics of the world and where it's going, I think to me, a leader, whoever is the person, I'm not talking about the CEO of a company, because you can be a leader in a family, you can be a leader in a tribe, in a community, in a soccer team, is someone simplifying that hyper complexity. Is someone recognizing that he doesn't know it all. Is someone, or she's someone as well, who brings some form of clarity about some vision she has that is shared with the team, that is obviously, hopefully, could develop with the team as well, which is much stronger if you want to make a long journey with the team. So that has been the highest level. So the principle I've tried to apply, and spending a lot more time than what I thought when I was younger on trying to discuss the why, the context of why we do things.
I think that's really important.
And to me, I saw people resonating with that a lot more because they feel they are part of the process, of the journey, of the thinking process, which is often, as you know, reduced a lot by leaders, executives who want to make it short to get to do that. Okay, the to-dos.
So if you were if I was a senior leader in an organization and you were coaching me on how to balance between certainty and ambiguity, because part of the truth is it's just uncertain and it's ambiguous. And actually, you can't be clear on some stuff.
No.
But there's pressure from everybody around you to be clear. How would you help me do a better job, a more nuanced job at balancing that?
There's another principle I've tried to, I've been using for a long, long time, and it's a common say that many people use. Focus on what you can control. Right. And in my life,
that's so helpful.
Beyond my jobs and professions, it's been always a mantra saying, okay, Jean-Philippe, this is your life, but this is what's going on in the world. And this is something you cannot really change yourself. You may dream about it. You may want to change the world, but okay, hang on. What can you do now today, here, right now? So I've tried always to balance that notion of, ambiguity, chaos, complexity, and what can we do right now together as a team to achieve something that is meaningful for both of us, that we can control, our own destiny. That's been my... May I reverse the table again to question you?
But I'm going to say, here's what I'm taking away from this. One is, explaining the context is helpful for people, because you can acknowledge ambiguity and uncertainty. You don't have to solve it.
Correct.
You just have to let them know that you know that this is happening.
This is happening.
That's reassuring, which is we're both... We're both seeing the same thing. And then within that context, going, of all the things I could control, what can I control? Maybe of all the things I can influence, what can I influence? And then all the other stuff,
forget it.
Forget it.
Don't boil the ocean, as we say. So as a segue to the next question, because I think we are already into that blue ocean of creativity, innovation together, Michael. You joined a change management consultancy after that, right? Helping organizations evolve and grow. And over the last 3 decades, you've been involved in so many significant change initiatives, I'm sure, with many customers. Along the way, you've seen some transformation projects succeed brilliantly, and some other failing spectacularly as well, I'm sure. And maybe many being underwhelming as well. And I guess this is the reason why in early 2025, you launched a new podcast called The Change Signal.
That's it.
So with the traditional change models that feels quite outdated, and I agree with you on that view, it's actually 40, 50 years old now. How can leaders start placing people, not processes, at the very core of the so-called transformation projects so that they foster real engagement and ownership? So in other words, what is your own new 2025 version of change management, Mike?
That's a juicy question.
I know it's a big one.
The first is just to acknowledge, just as you did right at the start of this podcast, about just it feels like everything's more layered, more complex, more global, more ambiguous. It feels like when I started in the world of change 30 years ago, it's like we're going to start a change project and then we're going to finish it and then we're going to start another one. Whereas now it's just like mille fleurs, it's like 1,000 layers of change and they're all happening at the same time. So for me, there are perhaps two foundational insights how I think about change. The first is to realize that to shift something in an organization, you have to understand two different types of change. One is individual change and one is organizational change. And I think people who lead change will have a bias towards one or the other. They're like, you know what? Let's do training because that shifts people's individuals' behavior. Or let's do a reorg because that way I can move boxes around. And people will have a preference towards one or the other, but you need both.
You need to combine both.
You need to shift the structures of an organization. And then within those new structures, you need people to behave differently. So the first step is to understand that some people, you'll have a bias towards one or the other, but you need to look at both of those and go, how's that working? And then there's two other types of change. This is more kind of philosophical. And the language I use around this is there's easy change and there's hard change. So easy change is the stuff that's more obvious, more plannable, more measurable, more tactile. So at an individual level, it's things like good training. Like we need to train you so you've got new skills and new behaviors.
You need to run some activities to get
At an organizational level, it's like good marketing. Like give me a good case for change. Make it compelling, make it interesting. Or it's like good project management, which is like, are we tracking the things? Are we making it happen in the way that it's meant to happen? That's easy change. It's not actually easy, but it's kind of more, it's a system. If you can run it well, you'll get it done. Then there's hard change. And hard change is more ephemeral and elusive and subterranean. So it's things like on an individual level. How do you help people process the grief of moving away from what they're leaving behind? And it's how do you invite people to have agency? Like it's really hard to invite people to take responsibility for their life. Because if you insist on it, you're actually undercutting their agency. So how do you invite those people forward? At an organizational level, it's things like, how does the power in this place really work? Because you have an org chart, and that gives you some clues as to how the power works, but that's not how the power works. So it's about understanding some of those more invisible, below the waterline type of things.
Connections, relationships.
No change project is the same, but I think if you're leading change, you need to be looking at those. It turns into a 4-quadrant model, right? Individual, organizational, easy and hard. And you need to be looking at all of those quadrants and going, where are we over-indexed? Where's my bias? Where's my comfort? Where's my bias?
Comfort zone,
where might I be blind to some stuff?
Blind spots,
Where might be uncovering that? And then two other principles that keep showing up in the conversations I've had. One is, remember the power of subtraction. I'm not sure if you've had my friend Leidy Klotz on the podcast
yet,
but he's a professor in the US in Virginia. And he wrote a book called Subtract. And it's extremely powerful for me because he just goes on to prove how how much of the time we just forget to consider that as an option.
I agree.
And actually stopping stuff.
Yes, dropping
is often
stuff.
the thing. Like stop adding. And when we think of change, we think of the new and the additional.
Yes. This one is so true, Michael. I remember so many times in my professional life, Microsoft, also outside, but talking about and pushing people, myself being pushed, to be honest, as well, by upper management in my career. What are you going to drop, Jean-Philippe?
Right.
What are you going to stop doing?
Yeah.
If you stop people asking, what do you stop doing? It's like, really?
Exactly.
Yes, Michael, you need to stop something.
Exactly.
And then you go to one key essential question, which is all about that.
Exactly.
If you say
yes
to,
what do you have to
say no to?
Exactly.
So I love that. I love that one.
This discipline of less.
Yes.
I mean, a friend of mine, David Lansfield, who's a kind of strategic coach.
Yeah.
He gave me a really powerful tool around this. It's related, I think, where he said everybody needs to know the 3 most important decisions they make. And I was like, oh, that is so great. Because everybody feels responsible, everybody feels burdened.
Yes.
But if you said, what are your 3 most important decisions? I bet you most people would struggle to actually answer that.
Yes.
But if you know that, you know what's most important, you know what your strategic priorities are, you know what you're saying yes to, you know what you're saying no to. It feels like a really big unlock in terms of clarity and courage.
And we'll come back to that kind of hierarchy of goals and structures later on.
Lovely.
But just to continue the dialogue on transformation, obviously, this is where and when I had the pleasure to work with you, Michael, as I was leading a major transformation of the entire Microsoft global sales force back in 2016. And the work we did was truly instrumental to the change of our management culture.
Yes.
I confirm, as you know, publicly that many times.
You have.
So just for our listeners, the change effort was actually the biggest ever for Microsoft sales organization. And probably the company itself, it involved more than 40,000 people, 26,000 of whom worked directly for me, actually, across 120 subsidiaries around the world. And the goal was to move away from a historic command and control approach and replace it with a culture of learning and coaching rather than inspection. Yeah. So given the many projects you've been running yourself with many companies and still these days, from digital transformation to mergers, product launches, technology upgrades, and more, and from your years of coaching and consulting, what's one powerful insight you've learned about addressing the emotional side of change?
Yeah.
And how does it transform the outcomes you saw?
I think a deep insight around coaching, which is an engine for change, is what's difficult about it is less knowing what a question is. Like everybody who's listening to this can whip up a question if they need to.
Yes.
But something magical is happening in the moment when you ask a question and then stop and listen to the answer.
Yes.
Power is shifted. Asking a question is an empowering act on that other person because you are saying, look, rather than me telling you what you should do or what I know or what I think is most important, you're going to ask a question, and in that is implicit I think you can figure this out. So it is an act of giving agency. It is an act of empowerment.
Yes.
Here's what's hard about empowerment, because everyone's like, oh, empowerment's good. Empowerment means giving up some of your power to that other person.
Yes.
So when you ask a question, you are left in an uncomfortable moment.
Yeah.
Because you ask a question and then immediately you're like, was that a good question?
Yes.
Are they going to have a good answer? What if they have a terrible answer?
Yeah.
What if I don't understand their answer? What if this conversation goes somewhere I don't expect it to? And you're in that moment of ambiguity and uncertainty, just like we were talking about before.
Yes.
Whereas if you're giving the answer, even if it is the wrong answer and it is solving the wrong problem, you're like, well, I've added value here. Like I've got certainty, I've got clarity, I've got status, I've got authority.
I feel great.
So I think, effectively what you're looking to do, I think in change and in organizations in general, is you are inviting people to take responsibility for their own freedom. That's a phrase from Peter Block, who's one of my favorite thinkers in the space. you're asking people to assume the responsibility that is theirs.
Yes.
And what that means often is inviting people to step more into the spotlight, to take on more, to be more.
In charge of their life.
It means that you need to give up some stuff and let go of some stuff. And that's just hard because
it is hard.
Because we like the things that we're holding on to. They give us something. They give us status and authority and control and all of that. And I think, the invitation is, if you're that person, it's like, oh, you've got more to get to.
Yeah.
There's more calling you as well.
Yes.
And until you let go of that and invite others to take that, what's next for you might not be as available.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and we are getting there actually, Michael, talking about and kind of peeling the onion of coaching, step by step, question by question on my side. So after those different experiences we just discussed together on kind of consultancy, on change management, but also creativity, innovation, and so on, you eventually relocated to Toronto in Canada in 2001, where shortly after you started your own company called Box of Crayons.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to become an entrepreneur? And what was the problem you are trying to solve?
Yeah. Well, I had becoming an entrepreneur thrust upon me because I was, originally we moved from Boston to Toronto, but my flight then was on 9/11.
Wow.
So it was a chaotic time. And the job I had lined up disappeared.
Okay.
Now, that company, the consulting company, lined up another job for me. So I worked in-house for 6 months trying to run a change project.
Yes.
Also didn't work very well. I got fired from that.
Okay.
I got fired from that on basically the day my Maple card, equivalent of a green card, arrived. So I could now set up my own business.
Okay.
So I was like, fantastic.
It was a lucky day.
So it was becoming to me that I was increasingly unemployable. I'm just not that good at having bosses. And I became an entrepreneur out of a quest for freedom rather than a quest for financial security or anything like that. And I honestly, my first 2 or 3 years as an entrepreneur at JP, my whole business model was, can I find somebody with a pulse and a wallet? and I'll try and do some stuff for them. So I ran focus groups, I did training on different things, I did all sorts of things.
All kind of stuff,
But we had lunch together before we did this, and I was talking about this metaphor from Jim Collins around to develop strategy, you fire bullets and then you fire cannonballs. Yeah. And what I can see in retrospect is that I was firing a lot of bullets, trying to figure out what my thing was.
Yes.
And I had the good luck of being invited by Nestle in Canada to build a coaching program for them. I was like, oh, this is the bullet that hit the target. I was like, oh, there is something here. Because, that idea of Ikigai, which is like, I've got a belief in the power of coaching.
Yes.
I've got a deep irritation about the way coaching is being taught, particularly within organizations. Yeah. I've got an opinion on how I could do this differently. This idea of few questions and you can coach in 10 minutes or less, and the other things that I've done to try and make coaching unweird and accessible.
Yes.
And I think there's a market here. Even somebody who's not a great salesperson like me, I can sell this.
Not a great seller. I can tell.
That was a moment for me where I was like, oh, I think I'm finding the thing.
You're finding the thing, yes.
And since then we've been trying to fire that cannonball in that space, which is like be the preeminent way of how coaching is taught within companies and organizations in general.
Yeah. No, I love this analogy of the bullets and the cannons. Yeah. And so coming to the cannons, because I think Coaching Habits has become a big cannon actually. Yeah. This is where we got to work together. And just to inform our listeners, I mean, you've been selling more than 1 million, probably 2 by now, I don't know exactly the numbers, of the Coaching Habits, which has really become a modern day classic in leadership literature and a must read and do, by the way, not just read it. And this book provides managerial leaders with 7 transformative questions, the essential questions, to make coaching a simple, everyday habit and become a coach-like manager. Exactly. Before we get into this meaty coaching conversation, can you frame for us the main differences between coaching and mentoring? Sure. And what are the main outcomes of a great mentoring relationship as opposed to a wonderful coaching experience?
Yeah. I think of mentoring as somebody who's walked the same path as you, and they've got stories to tell and they've got scars to show.
Yes.
I also think that the great mentors are great coaches. They lead with curiosity.
Yes.
Rather than leading with, look, I already know what you need to know, and I'm just going to tell you all of my war stories. They often have their experience inform the stories that they're about to tell. It's like, oh, I've seen this. I've walked that path, so I understand that. Coaching is a more general form. I mean, my definition of coaching is very behavioral. It's, can you stay curious a little bit longer?
Yes.
Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? And so you can see that doesn't require any real expertise.
Yes.
It's why I could coach you on stage.
Oh, yeah, I remember
even
that.
whilst I have no experience of leading a huge sales organization.
Yeah.
Because I've got experience in life. I've got experience of working with executives, and I'm really trying to hold the space with my questions rather than not. So for me, I think good coaching often involves teaching and advice. It's about slowing down the rush to teaching and advice and action.
Yes.
And I think great mentoring is the same. But those stories are often then informed by, I saw this myself when I was in your role.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I like that, because sometimes there's a lot of confusion between the two things, but they could share some commonalities, as you rightly said, I think, in the practice, in the way you do it. So love for you, Michael, to reveal the way you came up with the 3 fundamental pillars of coaching habits. And just for all of you, because it is so simple, so beautiful: be curious, be lazy, and be often.
Yeah. Shannon, who's the CEO of Boxer Crayon, says that, look, one of my gifts is that I'm good at thingifying stuff. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is just make concrete stuff that's already there. And part of what I'm trying to do is make them memorable and catchy. So it's kind of a bit of a marketing hook around there. So be lazy, be curious, be often.
Yes.
So being lazy, I just like that. Yeah. It's provocative. Because there's a lot of people like, I'm not lazy. I'm like, I need you to be lazy.
I know. I was shocked by that, actually, myself.
I think perhaps the inspiration from that might have come from maybe George Bernard Shaw, who said, progress depends on the lazy person. Because the lazy person's already was trying to find the better way of doing things. But really, when you understand coaching, it's like, stop working so hard to do other people's work for them.
Yes.
So I'm trying to set up tripwires so people don't rush into the, let me fix it, let me solve it, let me do this for you. And being lazy feels like a provocative way of remembering that, which is like, stop working so hard.
Yes.
You still have to work pretty hard when you're coaching, because you've got to work hard to manage the process and manage your advice monster and manage all of that.
Right.
But it's like,
it's quite demanding.
Allow them to do their work.
Yes.
So they can learn and grow and succeed.
Yeah.
You've got your own work to do.
Yes.
Being curious boils down to taming your advice monster. Another way of kind of thingifying this, making it real. When it boils down to it, most of us are advice-giving maniacs.
Oh, yeah.
We love the advice.
Love it.
And we're coming from such a good place, which is like, I'm trying to be helpful, I'm trying to add value. But, and I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about AI, but it's like, your advice has never been less good or more redundant in a world where AI can just give you the answers to most things.
Exactly.
So if people can reframe the way they are most in service, not as the person with the ideas, but as the person who helps figure out what the real problem is.
Yes.
That is a foundational shift in terms of the value that they add. So being curious, tame your advice monster.
Yes.
Stay curious a little bit longer. And then being often, I think is possibly the most radical of these, although it doesn't sound that radical. But it's a realization that every interaction can be a bit more coach-like.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be particularly a formal AJP.
Performance review.
Come up on my screen. I'm going to coach you now.
Yes.
It's more a general orientation to say, whether you're texting, whether you're having lunch with your family in a restaurant, whether you're in person, whether you're on email. Everything you do you can lead with a little more curiosity.
Of coaching all the time.
Yeah.
No, I love it. And I like you, Michael, as well, which I know is hard, to tell our listeners about the science of the 7 questions? Because Michael came up with those 7 incredibly powerful questions.
Yes. Yeah.
What's on your mind, Michael?
What's on your mind?
And what else? So can you share with us the process by which you eventually came up by picking those 7 questions?
It took me probably 2 or 3 years of working through iterations.
Yeah.
And the starting point for it was more art than science, JP, because I was like, I have a design principle in terms of both the training that I create and the books that I write, which is what's the least I can teach that would be most useful. Because I find most business books too long and too many words. Yeah. And I'm trying to create the essence of what matters. So already I have a bias towards subtraction, just as we were saying before.
Yes.
And I went through all sorts of iterations. I had like 5 questions. I'm like, that doesn't feel enough. I had 108 questions in one version. It was way too many.
Yeah.
And the way I do it is I do it with pen and paper. And I write them out and I move them around.
Yes,
and
visualize.
I'm just trying to find the arc of the questions that felt and most complete and enough at the same time. So in the end, I was like, with these 7 questions, you have a starting point.
Yes.
You have a finishing point.
Yes.
You have an amplification question and what else.
Yes.
You have a focus question, which is all about figuring out what really matters.
Yes, that's important.
You have a strategy question, which is like, what's the hard choice here? What am I saying yes to? What do I need to say no to?
Yeah, exactly.
You have a deeply human question, is what do I want? And you have a self-management question, and a kind of relationship question, which is how can I help?
Yes.
And it feels like that covers a lot of the field. And if you have those 7 questions, it doesn't solve every problem, but it probably is. It's like one of those 80-20 things, which like that gives you 80% of what you need. And I'm trying to make it as easy for people to remember what these questions as possible. And then what we did is after I designed that, we then tested that. We did some research and kind of found the science that said, this is why these questions work. This is why they're helpful as well.
No, I mean, I can confirm by using a methodology for more than a decade now, and not just in my professional life, but actually at the core of my NGO Live for Good with young social entrepreneurs who want to change the world, and also actually some of their coaches.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It creates. It creates a wonderful safe space.
Yeah.
A space for people to grow.
Yeah.
People to know more about themselves and to understand why and how they want to bring a positive impact to the world, which is the mission we are pursuing. And having this dialogue and the frame of reference you're using has been super powerful. So thanks for that contribution, Michael.
It's been an honor to work with you on all of that. And just to say for people listening, it's not just about personal growth. I think great coaching is about what's the problem we're trying to solve and helping people get clear on that. And how are you entangled in that problem? So how can you grow at the same time? So it is both about performance and about growth. You want both of those things. Solve the problem, grow your people to become more competent and more confident and more autonomous and more self-sufficient. You want all of that.
Absolutely. So a little while ago, I had the pleasure to host Dr. Caroline Leaf on the podcast. Caroline is a neuroscientist and a mental health expert who has developed a powerful 5-step method for managing our stress, anxiety, and toxic thinking. The 5-step neurocycle is about gathering awareness, reflecting, writing, rechecking, and actively reaching, and all of that harness our brain's plasticity for lasting resilience and growth.
I like that.
And it's actually something she researched, and it's a 65 days by memory, I think it is, and she applies that at a pretty big scale, actually, with a lot of good results and success. So I'm curious about the way you've been or not, incorporating the principle of neuroplasticity into your coaching approach, ensuring that old habits can be replaced by new, more impactful ones, which, as we know, so hard to do.
So it's helpful to know the basics of what a habit is to start doing that. And, there's been a bunch of good things written about that. Charles Duhigg wrote the kind of the book that kicked off habits.
I had him on my podcast, Michael.
He's great. He's fantastic.
He was great, yes.
And then, of course, James Clear and Atomic Habits.
Yep.
He said, look, I'm going to take Duhigg's book and just make it even more practical for them. Yep. My book is called The Coaching Habit. So there's a lot of habit stuff around. The way I think about it, and it's really influenced by Duhigg's work, is you need to understand the trigger. You need to understand the old behavior, and you need to understand a new behavior, and you need to get the reward from that new behavior.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's the starting, which is like, look, if you want to shift your behavior, habits aren't the only thing, but they're a good thing. And it's like, understand the basic science around that, which is like, when this happens, that's the trigger. Instead of the old way of behaving, I will behave in this way.
Yep.
And implicit in that, because I get rewarded in a certain way for doing that.
Yes.
So that's really helpful.
The cue, the routine, and the reward.
Exactly.
Yes.
So when people ask me, as they often do, so how do I start making coaching part of this? I'm first of all going, look, let's recognize that you're trying to re-engineer decades of behaving in a certain other way. Where you're like, look, I've built some deep habits about being really quick to give advice. Yeah. So just understand it's like, this is no small thing. And that neural pathway around when they start talking, I give them advice. Yeah, that never goes away, annoyingly enough. That stays in your brain as a neural pathway the whole time. Yes. So you have to work pretty hard to build a new neural pathway, this new behavior. Yes. So that's the first step around how I think about neuroplasticity. The other way neuroplasticity comes into the coaching process is significantly through the very final question of the 7. Yes. And that's the learning question. The key insight about the learning question, JP, is like people do not learn when you tell them stuff. Very annoying. But it goes in one ear and it goes out the other ear. They don't even learn much when they're doing the stuff. Yeah. They learn when they have a moment to reflect on it. So the learning question is, what was most useful or most valuable here for you? Yeah. So if we ask the bazillion listeners of this podcast, look, JP and I are rocking along. We've got 10 glorious minutes to come where we're going to share the very best stuff. I mean, the best stuff is still to come. But from all that we've talked about so far, what's been most useful or most valuable here for you? Yes. If you're listening to this, what you're doing now is you're actually casting your mind back. Yeah. You're extracting what you remembered. You're going, I think this was most useful for me. As you repeat that in your head, the neural pathway fires again. Yes. And you're re-strengthening that in your brain. Yes. So part of the power of the learning question is that it builds into this neuroplasticity to say, you refire the neurons to more deeply wire the new learning, so it becomes more of a shift for you. No, I'm with you, Michael. I think it's so important to build that habit of self-reflection. Yeah. In our daily work, in our daily lives. And it could be journaling. I know you do journaling as well. It could be a moment of self, I don't know, just taking a pause and walking and thinking about what's going on in your life and what matters in the last meeting we had together. I'm one of the most reluctant journalists in the world. I mean, I've been trying to do it for 30 years and failing for 28 and a half of those 30 years. But you're trying harder again these days, I know. But I'm like, there's so much good research that says a little bit of journaling builds a habit of self-reflection. And a habit of self-reflection continues neuroplasticity. Yes. And neuroplasticity helps you keep getting smarter and better and all of the above. Yes, absolutely. So shifting gears, Michael, I want to talk about goal setting, prioritizing your life, things that matter. So in my own coaching practice I have with young social entrepreneurs, those young change makers who want to change the world, right? I'm often asked 2 types of questions related to goal settings and priorities. The first set of questions revolve around traditional time management, SMART goals, the OKR process, that stuff. But the harder questions I found, which is expected actually, they ask me concern the true differentiating impact of picking the very few goals that really matter and being able to get them done. Right. So in your view, Michael, what's missing from traditional framework like SMART goals or OKRs when it comes to tackling the work that really matters? Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is how few you can actually do. Right. I mean, priority as a word means the first. So as soon as you say it's priorities, it's a contradiction.
Yes.
Like you shouldn't have priorities. You should just have the priority. Yeah. My friend Leanne Davey is particularly passionate about this. This drives her nuts. So it's like the Latin means it's the first.
Yes.
And the hardest thing about being strategic is saying no to all the stuff you want to say yes to.
Yes.
I think there's these there's different levels at which you have to say no to. Saying no to all the stuff you don't really want to do, that's easy enough.
That's easy.
It's saying no to all the stuff you really do want to do.
Yeah, that's harder.
It's so hard because you really want to do it. And you can make a really good case.
Yes.
And if you're a senior person, you can be really eloquent about why all of these things matter. And if you're trying to work on your own priorities, you're a very slippery person to yourself.
Agreed.
So you can find ways of convincing yourself that you should do 5 things. Yeah. I mean, over lunch, I was like, okay, here are my 4 goals at the moment. I've got a change signal thing.
Yes.
I've got the 10 years of the coaching habit next year.
Yes.
I've got loving Toronto where I live.
Yes.
I want to reboot. And even as I go that, I'm like, there are too many. There's too much here.
And you didn't even include your nephew's tour,
exactly,
world tour, with your nieces and nephews.
Exactly. So the thing about OKRs and SMART goals is that they often lack context.
Yes.
And I think that's what I love about what you said earlier on, which is how part of leadership is being able to speak to the context and help people understand the context in a different way.
Right.
And I think if there was a single thing, and I'm saying this as much to me, and hoping that, I'm 57 now, I'm hoping that one day I will learn this for myself. It's like you just have to keep being ruthless about saying no to stuff.
Yes. And
then the other slipperiest thing around goals is how they're measured. Because, as somebody once said, I can't remember who said this, if the metric becomes the goal itself, it ceases to be a useful metric.
Yes.
And the challenge with most goals is you set the goal, you define a metric, you then work to the metric, and you lose the purpose of the goal.
Yes.
So I don't have a good answer to this. Maybe you do.
No.
But understanding how you measure success is really critical. And what I find is one of the solutions to that is finding ways to measure the process rather than the outcome.
The outcomes, yes.
Because with so many things, you're committing to a process. Yeah. You're going to give it your best shot. And the actual outcome is a little bit beyond your control. Sometimes it works. You can have a really great process with a bad outcome.
Agree. Yes. It's all about the journey.
It's all about the journey. Thank you.
So, Michael, we're almost coming to an end. A couple of questions. First of all, I would like you quickly, if you can, to kind of frame again those goals that matter, because it's part of your book, How to Begin, Start Doing Something That Matters. Yeah. And you've got 3 key attributes of such goals. So
I call these worthy goals.
Worthy goals,
and, these are kind of like really core, your life goals.
Yes.
And I think a worthy goal has 3 great, strong attributes. It needs to be thrilling, important, and daunting. So thrilling is, it lights me up. It gets me going.
Love energy.
Not just in theory, but in practice, where you're like, man, I've got a fire burning around this. And it's a useful place to start, because often we inherit things that we go, intellectually, this should be thrilling for me, but it's not actually as thrilling as I thought it would be. Yeah. Important for me, in the words of Jacqueline Novogratz, founder of Acumen, is, can you give more to the world than you take? So it's like, how does this contribute to a better world? How does this speak to my
leadership
values?
Again.
That's it.
Yes.
And then the third one is daunting, because if it's daunting, it's going to be an area of growth for you. So it's like, you may know the first step or 2, but you may not know how to get to that end destination around that. And I think a worthy goal is when you find the best possible combination of thrilling and important and daunting. And you're right, that's in the How to Begin book.
No, I love the way you define it. And to the listeners, I must admit, I've been using that from a reference myself to shape kind of my 3 big priorities, that I've got to do.
I know.
Keep working on it. You've
got so many good things on your plate as well. Yeah.
So last couple of questions, which are always exciting, interesting for listeners, Michael. One is, could you describe a brief coaching routine or checklist, people love checklists sometimes, the leaders might follow in their weekly or monthly one-on-one sessions with their people?
Sure. I would, if I was having a weekly or a monthly one-to-one,
yes,
what I would be asking is, what are you celebrating? What do you know now that you didn't know before?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the one thing you're focusing on between now and when we meet again?
Okay.
And so what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to make sure that we celebrate the good.
Yes.
I'm trying to make sure that we celebrate the learning.
Yes.
What do you know now that you didn't know before? Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to make sure that we're strategically aligned so I know what you're focusing on. Because if you say, well, I'm focusing on my pottery class, I'm like, okay. I was hoping you might say something like this. And it gives me a chance to make sure that we're aligned on that.
Yes.
And maybe if there's a fourth question, I would ask, and how can I help?
How can I help? Yes.
Yeah. What's my role in serving you to support you in that?
Which is one of those key questions, actually, to ask.
Questions.
Love it. I love the simplicity of your coaching tips recommendations, Michael. Now I need to ask you my permanent obsession question I have to all my guests, which is, how do you personally define a positive leader, Michael?
I mean, you could write a great book around all the definitions people are giving you around this.
Yes.
So I think there's something about you give more to the world than you take. And there's something about you embody the best version of who you are. So you're constantly striving to show up as the best person. So you lead not just by what you tell people to do, but you lead by showing this is a way of being in the world that is aspirational for you.
Yes.
And I think if you're focused on external, which is like give more than you take,
yes,
and internal, which is how do I be the person I best want to be most of the time, that creates that yin-yang of positive leadership.
Very, very, not just insightful, inspiring definition, Mike. I love it. I love it because it connects always the inner side of ourselves, which is so critical, with the world. And between ourselves, one by one, and the world, there's all the others, all the people we build things and we do things together, and we get to create relationship with. Now, really, my last question. You've been impacting leaders worldwide through your books, your talks, and your coaching, including myself. Circling back on our earlier conversation on your Rhodes Scholarship, I'd like to inform our listeners that the students who've been offered the awards are passionately motivated by a desire to serve the world.
Yeah.
By coincidence, you just said that before. So ultimately, what is the legacy you opt to leave to serve the world in the world of positive leadership? What is Michael's unique contribution to the world?
I don't think of terms of legacy.
Okay.
Because that's one of the things I can't control.
Yes.
And I work on the assumption that, in 100 years' time, nobody will remember me, nobody will know me, and I'm fine with that. My personal mission is to infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus.
Wow. Possibility virus.
I've had that framing for 20 years. Now, possibility virus sounded way better before COVID.
Yes.
It sounds terrible now. But here's what that means to me. So 1 billion people means impact at a global scale.
Yes.
So it reminds me to be as ambitious as I can for me and the work that I do.
Yes.
The virus metaphor is that I don't need to be the hero of this. I need to create things that spread.
Yes.
So part of the joy of the work in Microsoft is like nobody really knows that this is me or I'm part of this.
Yeah.
But it's influenced the culture in Microsoft.
Yeah.
And we know that people have left Microsoft and gone to different companies and done similar stuff. So that influence is spreading.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of the fact that almost everybody who learns the coaching habit skills, nobody really knows my name, and I don't need them to know my name. And what the possibility virus is foundationally this. I want people to recognize that they are at choice, and I want them to make the more courageous choice. And part of what coaching does, and part of what all of this stuff does, is like helping you, this phrase again from Peter Block, take responsibility for their own freedom.
Yes.
You have more choices than you realize. See your choices and make the braver choice. That feels that will serve them and will serve the world.
Oh, what an incredible way to end, unfortunately, our discussion, Michael. It's been, again, an incredible pleasure to be back with you physically. The last time we were together was on a big stage with thousands of salespeople in Vegas.
And you haven't aged at all. I look tired and exhausted, but you're like young and sprightly still.
Of course. Thanks again for your inspiration, and your role modeling as well. I've been learning a ton from you, for your insights, for your methodology. And I highly recommend to our listeners, again, not just reading, but actually watching you on YouTube as well, and the coaching advice, the advice trap, and how to begin, and so many more things to come with your change signal and many other activities you have on your journal to come as well, Michael. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming all the way to Paris. I know you had another also occasion and a reason to coming, but I take it personally as a privilege. And to our listeners, if you enjoy hopefully that episode, please leave a nice rating, like 5 stars, always nice, and a few words of comment qualifying why you enjoy and what was the most helpful to you, which is one of the key questions Michael keeps asking with the right way. So stay tuned for the episode. The next one will be coming next 2 weeks. And as Michael said, again, we love more. We need, and we certainly have the desire to build more leaders who can serve more the world than they take out of the world. So thanks, Michael, for inspiring such leaders.
JP, thank you for having me along. This has been fabulous.
Thank you so much, Michael.